Hi everybody, I'm just back from making a video responding to Sanjay Bagga. So while I'm dressed like this, I thought I'd deal with a few more of these questions at the fireside. So here we go. The questions are from Jeffrey Stout, 5814. What was your gimmick? As you stated in another video, did other wrestlers accept that you would never be defeated and unmasked? Did other wrestlers get jealous of your status? Tony Jennings, 6791. What was your favourite venue to wrestle at and why? 22 Yellow. What job would you have done if you weren't a wrestler? Middle X Male, 9692. You said you could have made more money away from wrestling. Do you mean doing a different trade, or you had enough work anyway in the wrestling game? So, those are the 4 questions I'm going to attempt to deal with right now. So, let's go right to the very first one, which is a good place to start, isn't it? It basically says, did people get jealous of who you were and the fact that you had some sort of status in the business? Now, I'm going to go right back to probably only about 5, 6 or maybe 10 days after I started wrestling. And I'm going down to Red Ruth. Red Ruth is in Cornwall, by the way. And in those days, we used to travel as a group because Jack Atherton, who ran it, wouldn't pay individuals to go down there on their own. So I had to go with the team. Later on, if I went on these trips, of course, my status had gone up as a draw and I would go on my own. But on this particular occasion, I was scheduled to go down with a guy called Emil Polve, who was the referee for the evening. Now, Red Ruth's a long way away. What happened, everybody used to gather at what used to be really a greasy spoon on the A5. And they all gathered there. He'd be there with his Volkswagen, like a camper van, but it had seats in it, rather than being a camper van, but that type of vehicle with the little engine at the back, 1800cc engine, quite reasonable to run. And he was just, I'm pretty certain there was about 6 seats in it. 2 at the front, 2 in the middle, 2 at the back. 6 seats. And for this particular show, I was going to be on with Jim Uzi. Now, you remember, Jim Uzi was the guy that I wrestled the first time round in Willenhall Bath. So I'm on again with him. And Jim knows me a bit more now, and he's found out a bit more about me because he's had to do this show with me, hasn't he? So we get in the van and we go down. Now, you go down, you all meet at about 11 o'clock the day before, because Red Ruth's a long way off. You drive down, you get there. This particular thing was held in what you might call, not exactly an holiday camp, but it was a very small caravan site, but it had places where people could stay. It wasn't a big thing like Butlins or anything like that. Probably held about 500-600 people, perhaps something like that, in chalets and caravans. That's where it was. So we used to arrive there, left at 11 o'clock at night. We used to arrive there early morning, because Red Ruth's a hell of a journey. Remember, there's no motorways there are now. You're on all these horrible roads. It's an horrendous trip, to be honest. And then the others used to arrive there probably lunchtime or something like that the following day. Remember, that's 12 hours on the road. You go to bed there, because they provided everybody with a bed, had a chalet, I suppose, and we all shacked up in there, different bedrooms. Then they do a show at about 7 o'clock. Then we jump back in the van about 10:30, and he'd drop you off the following morning. So you can tell how long a trip and how everybody's getting a bit stressed out with all of this. Anyway, we do the show, and I'm on with Jim Uzi, and we're going back. I'll just fill you in. Emil Polve came into the wrestling business. This is the referee and the driver. He came into the wrestling business through Jim. Jim brought him in the wrestling business as a wrestler. Turns out that he didn't make it as a wrestler because he got a bad back, so he couldn't be a wrestler or didn't want to be a wrestler because it was too tough for him. Got this bad back, so he turned to refereeing and transport. Get there, we're coming back. On the way back, we hadn't got that far. I don't think we got that far, probably about 2 hours into the journey. And he starts chirping away. And he says something which annoyed me. He says, some people come into the job with a silver spoon in their mouth and they get to go over on people they shouldn't be going over on. Now, I'm sitting in the back with Jim Hussey, aren't I? And I think this remark's aimed at me. And to be honest, it was. So I got very annoyed at this. And I said, what the effing hell do you think you're talking about? And I'm getting up. Now, you've got to remember, there's a row of seats in front of me. I'm getting up and I'm going to go over the top, to be honest. Jim Hussey grabs all of me, pulls me back and says, quieten down, don't. Then he shouts forward to Emma, says, Errol, for God's sake, shut up and drive the van, will you? So we carry on to drive the van. Now, it's a long journey. And I've still got an head of steam on, haven't I? And I'm muttering in the back, telling Hussey what I'm going to do to this guy when I get my hands on him. And we eventually have to stop for a cup of tea, middle of the night. You know, by the time we stopped, because they had transport cabbies, they were open all night for the big wagon drivers. A bit like the motorways did later on, but these are what we used to call greasy spoons. They were on the main roads, you know, the A roads and things like that. And they opened all night. There was one on the top of Shap when you went over to Scotland and things like that. So we pull into this transport caff, because I think this is my moment, isn't it? And we pull into this caff, Emil gets out and he sets off. And I can't get out straight away because the lads in front of me you can't get through. There's not another door, you've got to get through the side door. There's two lads sitting in front of me. They've got to get out first. They get out, Jim gets out and Jim shoots off. And I shoot off after him. And I hear him on the way up saying to Emma, for Christ's sake, Emma, will you leave this lad alone? He'll do you. He'll have you. Now shut the fuck up. And I heard him say it. So I thought, I'll leave it and see what happens in the greasy spoon. So we go in the greasy spoon, he sits down, Jim sits with him, and I sit with somebody I don't know that I sat with, well away from her. And it all eased off from there. But if he hadn't have sort of almost backed down, that would have been a very messy situation, because I wanted him badly. And that just gives you a picture of who I am. Now, going forward, he refereed me about a fortnight later, and you couldn't wish for a nicer man. He was all over me. What can I do for you? What's this? What's that? So he'd obviously got the message that I wasn't the sort of person that you mess about with. But he was obviously sending me a message that I come in the job with a silver spoon in my mouth, i.e. Bartelli had looked after me, hadn't he? Got me in the job when, as far as he was concerned, I shouldn't be in the job and I shouldn't have this privileged position of going over on people like Jim Hussey. So that tells you how it was. And yes, that's just one example. And there were others, people that didn't like it. I mean, I've been asked the question, what did you think about Dennis Mitchell? Well, Dennis Mitchell was a guy from Yorkshire, a bit like Jeff Ports and people like that. They didn't like me. I mean, they were Bartelli's age, 40-year-old men, top of the bill men. And then they suddenly got to go down, lose to this 22-year-old, 23-year-old, whatever it was, around 22 at the time. They got to lose to me. Don't like it. And I will describe both of them as what I would call knickers. And I don't mean ladies' knickers either, let me put you right. What they do, they get in the ring with you and they take the show. If you don't watch it, you get the win, that's about all you get. You don't get anything else, and we call them knickers. They nick the show of green people who don't know what they're doing, greenhorns, which I was at that time. They'll nick the show off you. They'll take it off you. And you'll come out of the ring having got the winning fall, but you'll look like a piece of shit, basically, because these people could do that. They were clever at it. And if they didn't think you should be in the position you were in, that's exactly what they would do. They would nick the show off you. And you come out there thinking, in lots of cases, you wouldn't even know it had been done to you till somebody says something. Now, one night, this happened to me with Jack Atherton at Nelson, of all places. Jack Atherton. Now, Jack used to use me quite a lot. I went to Red Ruth for Jack, And this short Nelson is a bit further on, probably about a month or a bit longer into my career. I've gone to Nelson. I'm on with this fella, Carl von Kramer, who was really an English guy. I think he came from Manchester or that area, but he wrestled as Carl von Kramer. It's a bit German, isn't it, really? But he wasn't a German. And he was another one of these knickers. And I went, the orders are, I'm going to be the winner. I go in there, and I'm thinking I'm going to do something. He keeps, because you talk to each other in this ring, And he keeps on saying, not now, not now, not now. Take your fall. Not now, not now. Take your fall. And I'm listening to him, aren't I? I'm doing as I'm told, like a good little sparrow. And so I get the win, yeah. I come out, and Jack Adams in the hallway of this place. Go back to the jail. Jack Adams, like a windmill, he's shaking his hands like, worst show I've ever seen. Cancel all your work. I never want to see you again. Bloody awful. So I go back to, and I get changed. I go home, don't I? And I rang Bartelli up and I said, I've had the sack. He said, what? And I said, well, I've been on with this. He said, who are you on with? Carl von Kramer. He said, oh, bloody hell. So I know what's happened. He said, you've listened, haven't you? You've been led. You've been led up the garden path. He said, leave it to me. I'll have a word with Jack. So he has a word with Jack, and then Jeff comes back to me because he's had the word with Jack and says, he's got you on with this guy in a couple of days' time. You're back in. Jack realises what's happened, really. He was just a bit irate at the time. And Jack realised what's happened. He said, make sure it doesn't happen again. Of course, I went to this show the second time, and this guy got his pilot's licence. When it came out, Jack says, that's more like it, lad. Do it like that, and that won't go far wrong. So, yes, to answer the question, people were jealous. People didn't like it. It was difficult. You come into the job at the top. You're at the top. You've got a mask on. You've got to win every time. You've got people who because I'm a big lad, so, I'm not wrestling beginners. I'm wrestling established people. I'm not like starting at the bottom and crawling up. I'm starting at the top. And if they've got their way, I'm going to end up at the bottom and out of the job. But I'm a quick learner. So it didn't take me long to suss what was going on. And to answer the question, yes, they didn't like me, but I sorted them out in the end. So that answers that one. Right, the second question, as I said before, what was your favourite venue and why? Well, my favourite venue really was, to be honest, Bellevue in Manchester. It was an arena specially built for that type of thing. It was stacked up like that, like a proper boxing arena or something like that. It held probably 4,000 people at least. And the atmosphere was really, really good. Of all the venues I wrestled at, Liverpool Stadium, Hanley, even the Royal Albert Hall, although you've got 6,000 people, it's a bit remote. Somehow it's a bit, they're not in contact with you. But at Bellevue, you felt the audience were right there with you, right in the ring with you. The atmosphere was really, really magic. Of course, I did send in the girls from there. I mean, those of you not seen it, it's on YouTube. And to me, going back to my early career and right up until, I suppose, when it got knocked down, that was my favourite venue. Coming a very close second, of course, the Victoria Hall in Stoke-on-Trent. That's a close second for the atmosphere, the people. Because at the end of the day, the people that come to watch the wrestling make the show and make the venue. It's not about the building, or the building helps. It's really about the people. And if certain areas, they really get engaged with it. You feel they're right there in that ring with you. Although they're the audience sitting up here, you've got this connection somehow. So it's a bit like magic. It's like a magic trick. You feel, ooh, come and join me in this sort of performance that because they become part of it. They're not just an audience anymore. They're part of it. And once you've got that, it's magic. It's real magic. And I was fortunate enough to experience that a great many times in my career. When, although people were passionate and hated Kendo, in a funny sort of way, they also liked him because they came to see him, didn't they? So the hatred turned to appreciation, admiration. wanting to really get involved with this character. So it's a very strange mixture of like, dislike and passion and emotion. It triggers all sorts of different emotions, really, in the people that watch you. And that feeds back to you. And some venues get it over to you better than others. And those are the ones that I would say top of my list anyway. Other people might disagree, of course. But that's my answer to that one. Going back to the next here. What job would you have done if you weren't a wrestler? And the next one really is part of the same question. I said I'd make more money away from wrestling. Do you mean doing different trade? Well, what I meant when I said that and what job would I have done, I mean, I don't know how many of you know I was a coach builder to start with at Genesis in Sandbach. I learnt to build quite complex vehicles. But after I lost a finger, of course, that all ended. And during that period, when I was working at Genesis, I met the Count through his son, Barry. I suppose I didn't realise at the time, but that was a wonderful opening. It opened the doors. Bartelli said, show a man a door, and he'll walk through it. Well, he showed me the door, and I certainly walked through. Not only did I walk through to the wrestling business, but I also walked through into his life because he was quite a good businessman. He bought and sold anything and everything he could get his hands on. Mainly cars and things, but he would buy anything. I mean, I'll tell you a little story about Count Bartelli, which I'll show you what sort of person he was. He'd buy and sell anything, you know. His house was always full of bits of things, and he also had a guy with a second-hand shop in Crewe that he used to do a lot of trading with. If he got something, they would trade, you know. He might have an old candlestick or something like that, and he'd trade, and he also traded in gold and all sorts. But anyway, this particular night, we're on a show. I don't quite know where it was, but it's somewhere around the Manchester area. And who's in the dressing room but Keith Martinelli? Now, Keith Martinelli is a tough guy. I mean, one of the hard... He's not a big man, but he's as hard as nails. You know, he's one of those tough guys. And he's got a crate of brandy, probably about 10 bottles in this crate. And he's selling it in the dressing room, isn't he? I don't know how much it was. It wasn't like retail price. And I bought 3 bottles in the dressing room. Now, Bartelli didn't buy any bottles in the dressing room, but it turns out later on, Bartelli had a word with him, went out to his car and bought all he got in the car, which turned out to be about 3 crates of this brandy. And Bartelli must have loaded it up, because Bartelli's on the bill as well, you see. I think Bartelli was on with me at the time or something like that, because we were doing tags. So he loaded it up. I got mine in the dressing room, didn't I? 3 bottles. Other lads got them as well. Anyway, about 2 or 3 days later, I'm at home, knock on the door, open the door. I think my father opened the door. Because by this time, of course, I've got a stepmother. It might have been her that opened the door. And it's the police, plainclothes policeman. I want to speak to Peter. Come in. They say, where they knew where I'd been. They said, you've been so-and-so, so-and-so. I said, yeah. He said, what did you get? I said, what do you mean? He said, you picked something up there, didn't you? What was it? I said, you mean the brandy? He said, yeah, we do mean the brandy. And he looked round and he said, that's a bottle of it there, because there's a bottle on the dresser that I'd given to my mother. She liked to tipple, stepmother liked it. He said, that's one of them there. I said, yeah. He said, do you know that's stolen? I said, no, I don't know. He said, we know where you bought it. And he said, you'll have to come to the police station with us. So I don't think they arrested me, but they wanted to talk to me. Anyway, I go to the police station with them. And I was interviewed for quite a long time. And eventually, I mean, they wanted to know how I'd come about, who'd sold it to me. I had to tell them the truth. I mean, I couldn't lie. I told them who'd sold it to me, bought it, everything about it. Then eventually they got around to Bartelli. They said, this chap Count Bartelli was on the bill as well. I said, yeah. He said, did he have any? I said, I don't know. I haven't a clue. He said, come on, you know more about this man than you're making out. He said, do you know this man's one of the biggest fences in the area? I said, no, I don't know about it. He said, really? What's a fence? I played ignorant, didn't I? He said, come on, you know more than you tell us, aren't you? Tell us what he had. Did he get some as well? I said, I haven't got a clue. So eventually they let me go, and they tell me not to get in touch with Bartelli. For some reason they say don't get in touch with him. Of course, I get out and I got in touch with Jeff straight away. And I said to him, you know, I've been arrested or taken in an interview, and they're talking about you. I said, they've just told me you're the biggest fence in the area. He did a somersault. He said, what? What do you mean? He was outraged at the idea that he could possibly be a fence, or anything else for that matter. Anyway, all hell breaks loose, doesn't it? Because he has got some, but it's still in the boot of the car, isn't it? It's not in his house. It's still in the boot of the car. So he drives the car round to me at my house, and then we have to take the brandy, these 3 crates of brandy, to a garage that he owns off on the Tarbury Straits, a bit remote out of the way. And I think it's rented off at the time, and he dumps it there out of the way, so as nobody can find it, doesn't he? And I'm sworn to secrecy, of course. Don't tell anybody. Eventually what happens, I'm called back to the police station. This might have been several days later, and the policeman there said, you've got to go to Manchester and talk to this high-ranking officer in Manchester. So they let me go again, and I'm supposed to go to Manchester in a couple of days' time. So I go to Manchester. I mean, Bartelli more or less says to me, it's going to be all right. Now, I go to Manchester. In Manchester, I meet what was obvious to me a very, not an ordinary policeman. He was dressed very smartly and got little braids on his top and spoke with a rather, correct accent. Obviously wasn't a Manchester lad. And he said to me that I'd been very foolish to get involved with this sort of thing. And I was to make sure that I never got involved with anything like that again. And I would hear no more about it. And I was only with him about 10 or 15 minutes. That was it. So I went back home and I got in touch with Jeff, and I said what had happened. He said, what turned out to happen behind the scenes, Arthur Wright, Wright and Promotions, Ronnie Jordan, were very influential in the area. They were money people. Arthur Wright was very wealthy. Arthur Wright had a connection right back to Bartelli. He brought Bartelli in the business as Count Bartelli, didn't he, when he came out of the army. And he looked after Jeff, etc. I believe that it was all smoothed out at a very high level, that we all behaved ourselves in future and didn't get involved with all this, nonsense, and all would be quietly brushed under the carpet. And I believe it was down to Arthur Wright and the connections that they had in the Manchester area, because Wright and Promotions had their offices in Manchester, in Deansgate or somewhere like that. I don't know. I never went there. And I do believe that's what happened. So we never heard anything about it again. The brandy stayed in this garage for quite some time, and then eventually ended up in Liverpool, Burton Head, with a guy called Charlie Lee, who was a very wealthy man who said he bought it off Jeff, and I suppose he used it. He wouldn't try and sell it, Charlie. He was rich enough just to stick it in his wine cellar and have it when he wanted it. But I believe that the robbery consisted of about £10,000 worth of booze. A wagon load, apparently, that he broke into this warehouse in the middle of the night, loaded it all up on a wagon and drove it away. I only found out that much later on, of course. So that tells you, you're asking me what else I could have done if I hadn't been a wrestler. I don't think criminal's the right answer, but I certainly was being introduced to the entrepreneurial ways through Count Martelli. And those ideas have lived with me ever since. I've bought, sold and dealt with property, cars and all sorts of different things throughout my life. So I didn't need to be a wrestler. I could make a living off my wits, I suppose, or my entrepreneurial behaviour. So that answers that question really, doesn't it? If I hadn't have been a wrestler, what would I have been? I'd have been a clever little bastard, basically. I am to this day. So that answers really all these questions, doesn't it? I think we've come to the end of that. I don't think there's anything else I can tell you about myself. Well, there's a lot more I can tell you about myself, but not right now. There's a lot more to do with my entrepreneurial activities in London. I owned a car site in London, two actually, one down the Walworth Road and one a bit in the Stockwell Road, which was a showroom. And I'll just touch on that. It was right opposite two big open sites that were owned by gangsters, actually. And I knew them very well. But that's a story for another time. I'll come back and tell you all about that, because that's even more frightening than the branding. So I'll tell you that later. So bye for now.